shall we?
Sure.
While folks file in. So I'm so excited, Lisa, to have you on stage here. I really couldn't think of a more perfect person to interview at this moment in time because we are here at the new market. It's the intersection of retail and media. And you have a very interesting background. So I'll just do a real quick background. You're about 6 months into your role as president of Best Buy Ads. And you're
5 months, by the way.
5 months, OK. But you've had a lot of really interesting stops in your career in some of the best media brands of the world: Disney, Condé Nast, ESPN, Yahoo. It's your first time in retail. So you're coming to Best Buy Ads at a really interesting moment. I think it's an RMN that has a really strong foundation of on-site, off-site, in-store, and yet there's a lot of opportunity in front of you. What got you excited, and what made you decide to come into the world of retail?
Yeah, thanks for having me. And this is the first time at Shoptalk, and it's pretty incredible. And walking the floor this morning before coming to the prep, my brain was going on so many different ways and opportunities to show up creatively. So I think this is the beginning of a really nice journey in partnership with Best Buy. You know, look, I started my career on the platform side at Yahoo, and then I migrated to sports and streaming television. And so when I left Disney earlier this year, or late last year, retail media was where I wanted to go because it really is the intersection of influence and performance. And I think about all of the ways in which at Disney we were trying to engage the customer, the consumer, and drive action. And there's no better way to do that than in retail media. And you can bring all of the context along for the ride. So it absolutely has been a very inspiring 5 months. If you like to build, which I do, retail media is an unbelievable playground. You know, and I think we're architecting what the future of a media company looks like. And that's super exciting.
Now, retailers haven't historically been media companies. This is flexing a very new muscle. And in the early days of retail media, it was kind of like, stop acting like retailers. This is a different business. And a few years ago, Kara Pratt at Kroger Precision Marketing said, retail media is media, trying to emphasize the media component to it. Where do you come down on this debate? Is retail media, media, or retail plus media?
I think retail media is more than retail and more than media. So a couple of things that are interesting. You know, the lens that we have on the consumer is extraordinary. 200 million consumers we see in our graph. That's as big as any traditional media company out there. The amount, though, of detailed data we see on these users, so at Best Buy, we can attribute 93% of all transactions to the graph. That is, you know, I think a very unique asset to play with. Now, when you start to enrich that with other data sets, at Best Buy, we use Epsilon as a strategic data partner, as an example. So we really start to understand that consumer through lots of different dimensions. We also have, we're in the experiences business. So is that media? Is that retail? It's actually, you know, experiences is a really big business. I thought an interesting stat when I first got here was 30% of all of our sales are derived online, and 40% of all online sales are picked up in store. 40% of all online sales are picked up in store. The consumer is telling us something. The experience is really important. And so we start to think about a future state where what we're bringing to CMOs, what we're bringing to brands, is really about the data component, the distribution and reach component that we can deliver on-site and off-site, and then layer the experiences, the surprise and delight moments that we can create for consumers. If I was sitting up here and explaining this to you, would you all, just assume I'm talking about Best Buy? I am talking as much about NBC or Disney or Best Buy, right? And remember, Andrew, media is about persuasive storytelling, right? Media is about advertising. That's what we all, I got into this business a long time ago, not to age myself, but it's all about creating a palette for brands to create those really important connections with consumers. That's what media should do. And so as long as we hold that bar to those high levels, and I frankly think Best Buy and other retailers can check lots of those boxes going forward.
Now, Best Buy is building what I think of as one of the more interesting retail media flywheels, right? So the components of that would be commerce, advertising, and media. And the media component is something that maybe retailers don't always have or have to build out. But it's all built on a foundation of first-party data. Tell me more about the foundation on which this business is built and what makes that unique.
Yeah, as I said, the graph is super impressive. What you'll see us do over the next several years is operationalize and productize that graph so that we can do the more sophisticated work that you all want us to do in clean rooms, doing data collaborations with unexpected partners, and activating, right, that 200 million. Half of that graph is tied to a membership at Best Buy. So again, the loyalty and connection that we have to consumers, I think, is really interesting. It leads us to even more interesting places from a partnership standpoint. So, the offline piece of a retail media network is only as good, I believe, as the ability to curate that experience. Curation becomes really important, right? We've all spent a lot of our time living in ecosystems where black boxes are not good, right? We've learned that there's, the unknown can create really dangerous places in terms of consumer privacy, et cetera. So CNET, as an example, is a really great, it's probably, the holy grail of partnership for Best Buy because it takes what's endemic and what we know about our consumers and it marries it with context. Right? We understand that the premium product that we're selling is a journey. We're not selling, soap, if you will. And so CNET allows us to bring that full funnel experience to the market. The consumer benefits, the advertiser and vendors benefit, and so finding more of those. Not everything is going to be so contextually relevant as a CNET. I think Allison is coming on next. In NBC and really thinking about how our data translates to premium environments, right, around streaming television. Those are really interesting to us. Sports, when you can reverse engineer the graph to understand the consumer through the lens of, their habits and passions and culture, that tells you where you go next. I don't have to tell Best Buy where we go next. The consumer is guiding that. We're an official partner of the NFL. We just became an investor in tomorrow's golf league, TGL, which is super interesting if you haven't checked it out in Florida. So these are all of the prisms that I think wind up curating that offsite experience, which, by the way, has to deliver reach and scalability, so that when our data travels, we can deliver on those key objectives. But to be honest with you, we're just at the beginning stages. It seems like it's fun. I mean, this is for me, like everybody wants to do business with us, and it's a puzzle. And I think over the next 12 to 16 months, we're going to show the marketplace what our puzzle looks like, and it's going to be super exciting.
Well, that's a nice segue. Speaking of marketplace, a bit of news that came out a few weeks ago that I'm particularly excited about because I've been like, when's Best Buy going to do a marketplace? When's Best Buy going to do a marketplace? And lo and behold, you announce you're doing a marketplace coming in the summer. Tell us about that and what it means to the on-site side of the business.
It will be one of the bigger things that I think Marketplace is a change agent for the business. It's a priority of the company. So it's exciting to be in a company where your senior executives, plant the flags on these types of businesses. And as a result, we organize our entire sort of footprint around something like Marketplace, which is going to launch in July. Look, the diversity it's going to bring, competition in the marketplace is a really good thing. It's great for our first-party sellers, and it's even more opportunity for our 3P sellers, and it creates a better environment for consumers, right? Selfishly, as somebody who's looking over the ads business, all boats rise. When you look at, and you might do this in your presentation later, when you look at where the growth is coming from as a result of retail media, 3P sellers are driving a significant amount of ad revenue. In theory, they are some of the most sophisticated buyers of media. And so as we're in the thick of building out the platform and the capabilities and the expectations of what those 3P sellers need to be successful, and that'll start to roll this summer.
And if you want to know why Amazon is a $50 billion business, it has a lot more to do with those third-party sellers than it does the big brands. Let's shift gears to off-site retail media, because this is kind of your sweet spot. You spent a lot of your career working with these types of media companies. So right now, to date, Best Buy has 2 high-profile partnerships. You mentioned the CNET one, which I think deserves a lot of credit for being the first of its kind. This is the first time we've really had a digital publisher partnering directly with a major retail media network. And then also one with Roku for streaming TV ads. So let's talk a little bit more about the CNET partnership. What do you think makes so much sense about that one in the context of digital publishing?
Yeah, I mean, look, all of these partnerships are designed to do a couple of things really well, right? It is the opportunity to activate reach and frequency in a meaningful way. In the case of CNET, as I said, it's super contextual. In the case of Roku, it's really about activating streaming reach with our data layered on, right? At its purest, most basic function. What we've learned over this last year is we have to make that process super simple, right? Which isn't simple, by the way, to do, because you really have to be able to activate sophisticated measurement as part of that. It's really about bringing your data, supply, and measurement into one programmatic ecosystem, one automated ecosystem. That could be programmatic, that could be self-serve. And so you'll see CNET 2.0 unfold shortly. And that partnership, by the way, is all about now expanding to Ziff Davis, who recently acquired CNET. So the opportunity becomes bigger. And you'll see it become a lot more automated and sophisticated in terms of how you're able to buy and transact. But again, I think there's so many other partnerships that are in the works, none that I can speak of today. The one I can speak about today is the one we announced last week with Meta. We were going to announce it from this stage. I thought it would be a little bit too crowded, and I think we were right in terms of how many brands are here activating. But to me, that is a best-in-class example of being able to extrapolate the data of Best Buy onto the social buying platform of a Meta and connect those two ecosystems in a way that allows brands to optimize performance inside of an environment we all know is already being purchased at tremendous scale. That was announced last week. Meta is our first partner in that product, which is Social Plus, and that will continue to expand to other social platforms over time.
And you alluded to some other partnerships. I know you can't make new news, but we have to imagine there's going to be more streaming TV partnerships. That's kind of your wheelhouse, right?
There's nothing for me to talk to today except to say the convergence of all media is something that retail media can deliver for the industry, right? If you think about the opportunity that folks like Best Buy have to bring along curated media and make it performant, right? And performant doesn't just mean ROAS. I think we do a really good job as an industry. As I look at our results, we helped 600 brands last year in our RMN. We had over 2,000 campaigns with those brands. By the way, we made every piece of creative for every single one of those 2,000 campaigns. So it's interesting to see when you think about big media, that's something we used to do, or something that Disney does quite well in terms of the creative component. We do that as well. And the return on ad spend is 4x on average. So there's definitely a secret sauce to retail media that other media cannot deliver. However, some of the things that I've been surprised about, Andrew, is when I look at campaign results. We just did one with a major electronics on Roku. Our data, Roku supply, we drove significant ROAS. We drove incremental reach, so we talk a lot about incrementality. And we drove consideration and purchase intent amongst 18 to 24-year-olds. One campaign, pretty small investment, by the way. This wasn't, it's got to be the big campaign. Checked all 3 boxes, right? On-site and off-site. So if you think about that, and we think about, I spent a lot of time in my past talking to CMOs. We spent a lot of time in retail media talking to shopper marketing management at companies. That conversation has to escalate because every CMO wants to deliver ROAS, incrementality, and drive those upper funnel. You've got to fill the top of the funnel to deliver the bottom of the funnel, right? So that's the kind of encouraging sort of strength and signal that we're going to keep building upon.
And we're at the beginning of this performance TV era. You mentioned ROAS. It's great when campaigns look really good, but sometimes with more expensive media, all else equal, ROAS doesn't look as good. And that can only be a small piece of the equation. You're mentioning things like reach and frequency, right? This is the language of media research, national media, of CMOs, and we're not speaking that language yet. Don't we need to start doing that?
Yes. The dirty little secret is the majority of the television business is still traded on reach and frequency, right? That's billions of dollars that are still being purchased on demos, reach, and frequency. I would argue for any CE client, large and small, all the way down to the long tail, if Best Buy supply, data, and experiences can make that media work harder, would you say yes to that or no? The answer is going to be yes every single time. The other thing I would say, somebody's clapping. Yes, we should clap on that. When you're sitting on the other side of a trading platform and you see what clients are willing to bid for audiences and inventory, we talk in generalizations as an industry, but I've seen way too many times what folks are willing to negotiate at an upfront table and then buy in a biddable marketplace to hit those ROAS goals. They're not always the same. So I would put performant media, which, by the way, is every version of media, layered with the right data and the right reach and frequency in the right context. It all is performance. And so as we build the Best Buy portfolio, it is going to include, a combination because, I saw this other stat. I can give you guys stats because I'm 5 months in and I'm in learning mode. When you start to add multi-channel to a retail media buy, the results go exponentially up to the tune of 15 to 30% on average on ROAS, right? So these are really important signals that as an industry, everybody in this room is expert in retail media. But as you start to walk out of, this conference convention center, there's so much educating that has to happen up and down the hallways. And, we will take that on through the lens of specialty retail, right? We fuel a third of all consumer electronic sales in this country. It is our responsibility to bring the best version of retail media to the category. But there's so much educating that we still have to do.
Yep. Well, I think we're going to have to leave it there. But
Okay.
I think this is a message to CMOs. It's time to listen, wake up. We're at the performance TV era. We're moving up the funnel. And it's time to start tapping those national media dollars. So with that, Lisa, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.